one thing about chess before the advent of modern computers, it really was a battle of the minds. Before deep, very accurate opening theory became part of the game, basically it was a battle of which one of two people was the smarter person, whoever won the game of chess. Now, obviously, that's an oversimplification. It wasn't really true, but it meant something to win a game of chess, and it still does. But oftentimes, it's the person maybe who's memorized more lines or worked with their computer on that variation a little bit more. That's one of the reasons why I think we love the games of Paul Morphy, because with him, it really was a reflection on his own brilliance, with no other sources there to help him. This game was played in 1850. His opponent is Ernest Morphy, who was his uncle, I do believe, and was a very strong player, as you will see in this game, and was a big organizer of chess in the New Orleans area. So Paul Morphy has the white pieces. Ernest Morphy has black. Let us jump right in. Morphy, they're both named Morphy. Paul Morphy begins with e4, e5 from Ernest Morphy, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop to c4. White plays the Italian game, and after bishop to c5, no surprise, one of Paul Morphy's favorite openings, the Evans Gambit, is played, where white gambits a pawn on the side of the board, hoping to build a strong center and get an attack in exchange for that pawn. Black takes, c3. Black can go back to e7 if he wants. It's a fine move. But Ernest Morphy plays bishop to a5, trying to keep some pressure aiming at this king. Paul Morphy plays d4. Black takes. This is all theory. Even today, it is played. And in an earlier game, Morphy played the move queen to b3, taking direct aim at f7. But in this game, he just goes ahead and castles. And black can play knight g to e7 here, and it looks okay. It looks like black is close to equal. But Ernest Morphy goes ahead and takes the pawn with his bishop. Now, that does mean he's giving up a very nice minor piece, although it looks like it works for a while. Paul Morphy takes the bishop, and here bishop to a3. A very strong move. It controls a key diagonal, and by hitting f8, it means that at the moment, black could not castle short. Of course, the knight's in the way now, but if the knight were to move, he couldn't castle short because the bishop controls this f8 square. So black plays the most natural move in response to that, which is d6, to block the range of that bishop at a3. But Morphy doesn't mind that. He's got an idea to open up this diagonal later. Now queen to b3, the classic idea, hitting the f7 pawn and putting some pressure on b7. And it turns out the best move for black here is the move bishop to e6, directly challenging that diagonal. If white takes on b7, then knight g to e7, and black is fine. He can play the rook to b8. The queen is defending the rook, so black is fine after that. So the best move here would be to take on e6. And when pawn takes, again, if you take with the queen, then after queen to e7, you have a fairly equal position. The best move, and a hard-to-find move, Morphy probably would have found it, though, is knight to g5. The knight and the queen work together to hit the e6 pawn and square, as well as put pressure, x-ray pressure on f7. The reason why it's a hard move to find is because the knight is actually hanging here. But if black were to take, then queen to b7, the queen no longer defends the rook, and white has a pretty good position after a rook to d8. Queen takes knight, threatening the c7 pawn, so rook to d7, rook a to b1. But even here, the game's not over. White's just a bit better. So that was definitely the best idea, to play bishop to e6. Ernest Morphy defends the pawn with knight to h6 instead. So the knight controls f7, or defends f7. Now queen takes c3, threatening the g7 pawn. And black can castle here, but instead he plays queen to f6, offering the exchange of queens. He's up 2 pawns, so why not, right? Morphy's not going to do that. And here he plays the move e5. That's a key move. And when he played bishop to a3 earlier, I'm pretty confident he already had this move e5 in mind, to open up not only the a3 f8 diagonal, but also this e1 file leading to the king, or the e1 square. Pawn takes, rook f to e1. Now he's threatening the pawn with 3 pieces. Bishop to d7. He doesn't take the pawn, but he plays rook a to b1, aiming at this b7 pawn. And now Ernest Morphy castles long. Now, at the moment, he's up 3 pawns. He won't be able to keep all of that material, obviously, but it looks like he's done a pretty good job here, actually. And I think he has. He's up material. His king looks pretty safe. The pawns in front of his king haven't moved. They're pretty solid. And in fact, there's only one move here that even gives white equality in this position. And the key to finding the move, and Morphy does find that move, is to use the focal point idea, right? So if you're going to attack the king, which one of these 3 squares is the weakest? And the answer is b7, because it's only defended by the king. This is the most sensitive square, and Morphy makes the move that puts the maximum pressure on that square, and it's a shocker when you see it. Bishop to a6, willing to give up the bishop, and Ernest Morphy should have taken that bishop. After pawn takes bishop, queen to b3. Now, it was thought, and even in the book that I originally saw this game in, the assumption was that Morphy was completely winning in this position and that black had no chance. The threats of coming in on b7, and a variation that was given was bishop to e6, and after queen to b7, king d7, rook b to d1 check, knight d4, and that this attack is going to be decisive, which is true. But what modern technology does show us is that after the move bishop to g4, black actually is equalizing here. He's even here. It's still dangerous, of course. He has to make accurate moves, but after queen to b7, king d7, rook b to d1 check, king to e8, because the bishop is not on e6, the queen can defend the knight at c6. So, in fact, black can play on here with a fairly equal position. Dangerous. I mean, Morphy would have probably won, but it was playable. But being afraid probably to take that material, knowing how strong Morphy was in the attack, his uncle plays knight to a5. Of course, that knight at least temporarily defends the b7 pawn, even though it's vulnerable to the queen. Morphy does not take that right away, but plays rook to e to c1, threatening an immediate mate on c7. Black plays bishop to c6 to block that mate. Now he takes the knight. Now black takes the bishop at a6. But now things are different. And after queen takes a6 check, black is in huge trouble. King to d7, pretty much forced. And now rook takes bishop. Really tough because obviously he's threatening the queen. And if the queen were to take on c6, then knight takes e5, forks the king and the queen. It's all coming apart. It's not even the only winning move, but that would certainly do it. So black plays queen to f5. Rook takes c7 check. And the rook cannot be taken. King takes c7, queen to b7 is checkmate. Notice that this strong bishop at a3 is still there causing problems and controls this d6 square. So king to e8 is played. Queen to c6 check. Obviously, if he blocks with a rook, then rook to c8 is mate. Again, covering those squares. So he plays queen to d7. And the fastest win for white here is to just take the queen. And after rook takes, rook to b8 would be mate. But Morphy plays a move that has a little more panache, a little more sizzle to it, even though it delays the mate by one move. He plays the move rook to b8. Obviously, the rook cannot be taken because then just queen takes queen would be mate. So queen takes c6 is c6 is played. Queen takes queen, but that allows rook to e7 check. The bishop supports the rook, forcing the king to go to f8. Then rook takes rook check, and only one move can be played. That's the queen back to block. Then rook takes queen is mate. Very creative chess from Paul Morphy. The way he zeroed in on that b7 square by sacrificing his bishop. Really impressive stuff. We can't help but become a better attacking players going over his games. Thank you for joining us at Chess Dog. See you again soon.